Sir.
All right. Welcome to Corporate Law Lab. I'm Neil Taylor, Director of the Corporate Law Center at the University of Cincinnati College of Law. We're joined today by Susan Bridgman, General Counsel of Karman Space and Defense. We also have with us one of our corporate law fellows, Christian Bugher. Welcome, Susan.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
And Christian.
Thank you. Excited to be here as well.
So let's kind of go back to law school. It's been a bit for both of us, but I still remember it. You went to UD, and I think I guess go back even further. You went to Ohio State undergrad, which I will try not to hold against you, but since I went to Indiana and we have a better football team than you now,
At least you're not blue and gold.
I'm not blue and gold. And I can't get used to the idea that we're a football school now, but there it is. You studied language as an undergrad, is that correct?
Yes.
And and that's not, you ended up doing a lot of tech and technical stuff afterwards. How did studying language connect, or did it not at all?
Well, it has an indirect connection. So, back when you and I'm assuming we're roughly the same age, went to college, you could actually go to college and study something you were interested in because you could get a job. There was no doubt you could get a job. So I love language. I don't have a drop. I have an Italian major. I don't have a drop of Italian blood in me, but I love the art, the culture, the food, the everything, the country. So majored in Italian, went to school in Italy, came back, did a corporate job for a couple years, and then, decided to go to law school, which had always been my plan in life, was to go to law school. And here's where language comes in, and my interest in the world in general, outside of, just the US, I'm interested in the world. I assumed I'd be going into international law. So, get into law school, the first 2 semesters, of course, they tell you what to do. You get to start taking your electives, your second semester or first semester, second year. And at the time, federal income tax was on the bar. So, everybody took federal income tax. And I also took international law at the same time. And I took federal income tax and I flamed on. I took every tax course they had to offer. I was the top tax student in my year. And so things change. And I think what makes life so interesting is you have your plan, you have your path, you're working your plan, something else comes up, and you have to kind of have the confidence in yourself to move in a different direction. It's not part of your plan, but this opportunity has been presented for some reason. So you should investigate. So I graduated from law school. I literally sent out 4 resumes and got 2 job offers, one of which was at Deloitte, who was creating a position for me. And the other opportunity was at the Second District Court of Appeals, the state appellate court. And every professor I had said, take the appeals court, you can always go into tax. And that's true. I took the Court of Appeals job, and one of my law school colleagues, she also went at the same time. We were the first 2 staff attorneys that were ever offered more than a 2-year tenure with them. And it since has become a full-time job. That is your job out of law school. So I did that for 2 years, and then I went in-house, never having had any tax experience whatsoever. And I went into a highly specialized area of international tax, transfer pricing, Section 482. And NCR took a chance on me and hired me with no experience. And the reason they did was there had been a major, major change in the transfer pricing regulations. So everybody was in the same boat in new exposure to new regs. So it didn't matter if I had experience or not. We were all starting at ground zero. So that's how I moved from international law to international tax. And then again, going in this atypical trajectory, I went from in-house to a large law. That's unusual. Usually goes the other way.
Yeah.
So
I think we've had one other person on that went from in-house into a big law firm. Usually it's completely the opposite way. You mentioned that you worked a couple of years in between undergrad and law school. Would that really, I mean, I did the same. I was selling windows and doors. So, and
I was selling $100,000 copiers.
there you go. How do you think though that impacted how well you did in law school? Did that help having a
Yes,
years in?
yes, 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 absolutely. So um, I've been getting 2 externs a semester from UC for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years now. And of course, this semester I have 3. And my requirements have been, if possible, I want a non-traditional, one of them to be a non-traditional student, meaning they've had some life experience, some work experience between undergrad and law school for that very reason, is that there's a different, there's a different mindset. There's a different perspective. They have some context of how, when you come right out of law school or right out of undergrad, they don't even know what is a business entity. What do you mean a business entity? So there's like no context to say, can you look into this for me? Because context really helps you understand what the assignment is and really even the reason for the assignment. So it's not to say that only non-traditional students have value, not at all, because I would say probably 50% of the externs I've worked with from UC, they have come right from undergrad. But I like, uh, I'm not so much, it's not so much the experience as it is like the attitude.
Yeah.
So I'm very interested in anybody who's intellectually curious,
Right.
so high energy, self-starter, and so you get that a lot of times with non-traditional students, but you also get it with traditional students.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, it was, you know, the difference between the amount of work in undergrad and law school is usually huge. I mean, I suppose there are people, my daughter got a physics degree. I'm sure that was harder than anything I've
Law
ever
school.
tried to do.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
But, compared to getting a political science degree and getting a law degree, I could pretty much watch TV and do my homework, and doing poli sci, or not do my homework at all, Whereas can't pull that off in law school. But when you come in with the approach of treating it like a job,
That's
uh,
right.
it makes it, for me at least, so much easier. And I think a lot of the people who did well in my class had not gone straight through.
Yeah.
Um, so when you went in-house at a big firm, it's now part of Dinsmore, is that right?
Yes. Yep.
Why did you look at leaving NCR and joining a big firm?
Um, so, um, my job between college and law school was with Eastman Kodak Company. So big, really at their heyday. They were a very significant public company. And I was very successful there. But I hated public company life. And so I swore I would never go to another public company. So I go to a public company And frankly, I was the first woman tax attorney they'd ever had. There were true issues with me being a woman with children. Uh, Definitely not the place for me. And I swore after that, okay, this time I really mean it. I am not going to another public company. So, you know, I looked around and I wanted to do tax and I wanted a sophisticated tax practice. And I must say, with NCR, that was a Wall Street caliber tax practice. You know, big, sophisticated transactions, which I loved. It was very interesting. It was a real stretch intellectually, which I loved. So, you know, looked around. My husband had started his own business, had to stay in Dayton. So, you know, this was the natural place to go, and worked for a great, probably one of the three smartest attorneys I've ever encountered, as the head of the tax practice, and, you know, got exposure to every, you know, wide variety of tax issues. But, you know, at the end of the day, large law has a lot in common with being in-house at a public company. So there are things that, in my view, for me, there are things that just get in the way of doing the job. Can you just let me like do my job and do a good job? But, you know, there's the constant worry about billable hours and, you know, I can take as much time as I want to bill something, knowing that they're going to only bill a fraction, and now I'm behind in my, you know, in my firm billable hours. So, you know, that whole thing, and I learned something really valuable from that when I went out on my own. I'm like, I'm doing everything on a flat fee. And if somebody's going to pay me on an hourly basis, they're going to pay big on an hourly basis because, you know, clients love a flat fee. I love a flat fee. So, yeah. So lots of reasons for big, you know,
We could have a
as again,
debate.
as I said, yeah.
No, I say we could have a debate on that. I always found when I was a GC or deputy GC that whenever I engaged a law firm on a flat fee, and maybe it's different when you're talking about someone like yourself that was um, you had your own business, so you
Yeah,
didn't have people to answer to about how many
that's
hours you were
right.
doing. Because
Yeah.
whenever I engaged a law firm on a flat fee, I felt like everything was great as long as they were winning. By which I mean they may have been billing me on a flat fee, but they were keeping score the old way. And
Yeah. Right.
and I knew, I knew when I was getting more hours than and spending more of their time, if the bills would have been higher, had they been billing their hours, they became unhappy with the flat fee arrangement. And if they were quiet, I felt like I should be unhappy with the flat fee arrangement because they weren't chirping about it. Um,
Yes.
but I guess the difference in that situation is you didn't have somebody to answer to about whether or not you had to determine yourself whether or not you'd struck a good deal on the flat fee.
I would say, you know, not every engagement lends itself to a flat fee. Like I'm working with outside counsel right now to do some trademark work, and it's all on a flat fee. And even, you know, even on like next rounds, if USPTO, here's what will happen. One of three actions from USPTO will come after the filing. And if it's this, and we respond to option one, the fee is this. If it's option two, the fee is this. So certain thing, you know, I don't litigation. Wouldn't we all love to do litigation on a flat fee? Uh, or how about a success fee?
Well, I mean, contingencies. I mean, yeah, you can do a lot with like discounted hourly rates with a success fee. Um, those kind
We
of
don't see that normally in the corporate arena.
not very often,
Yeah.
no.
not very often. Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, I got you off track.
No, that's okay. Geez, yeah. Now managing outside counsel. Whew.
Well, let's just go there. When I started managing outside counsel after having been outside counsel, I started off being very solicitous and, I understood what was going on their side. And I think that lasted about 3 months.
Yeah.
Um, how's that been for you to go from being outside counsel to managing them?
Yeah. I would say because I've had my own firm for so long and I wasn't cheap. I never once had a client question a bill, complain about a bill, squawk if I raised my fee. None of that. So, I always, as a personal business owner providing legal services, I really make it easy for my clients to work with me and to keep my clients happy. And so I know it can be done. And it may not necessarily have that attitude in the mega firms, but if you step down a level and they have truly the same caliber of representation, you know, clearly you want a white shoe firm if you're involved in bet the company litigation, right?
Yeah.
But for rather typical straightforward corporate legal issues that come up, there's absolutely nothing wrong with going to a smaller firm. And smaller firms are much more likely to have the attitude of this is a partnership that, I, as the outside counsel, need to really develop this trusted relationship with the chief legal officer. And so I don't know that you get that with big firms. So because of that, and I have the luxury now, being in the role I am, to want to work with firms that have this attitude of let's really work together. And because of that, I am less deferential.
Got it. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So when you left private practice, um, I think you were director of business development at Brady Ware. What was that?
I would say that's a knee jerk from leaving Big Law.
Okay.
I had done, for Eastman Kodak. These were, I was a national account sales rep. So, $100,000 copiers, but, $5 million contracts. So
Yeah.
that was pretty significant back in the day. And Eastman Kodak had very professional sales training. You went off for 4 months to corporate headquarters in Rochester, and it was 10 hours a day of professional sales training. So when I needed to take a break from the beat up of big law, because it's not my personality, it's just, there's nothing wrong with big law per se. It was not suited to me. I am rather non-traditional, which I'm surprised to hear, but I really am non-traditional. I like to forge my own path. So I looked to, what can I do? I could do sales. I could do sales or professional services because I was a tax attorney for 7 or 8 years. It made perfect sense to go with an accounting firm. And I knew the managing partner because I've always been very active. Business development as a lawyer, very active. I was one of the only associates in the firm that was doing business development, just because I like it. I like networking. So, I met the managing partner of the firm just out and about in these connections, and we got to talking, and they created their first ever director of business development for me.
Did you enjoy it?
I did, and it was politics again that drove me away. Actually, I'm quite honest. They terminated me because there was an internal dispute because in that role, I did not have billable hours. I was a cost center, not
Right.
let's, forget all the revenue I brought to the firm. That didn't matter to a certain element of the leadership team. Half the leadership team said, she's cost us too much money because we can't bill her out. And yet I had a really low salary and my money was made on commission. It was made on what I brought in. And so, I always got outrageously good performance reviews and then, they let me go. So
That's one of those things where it sounds great when the role is created for you. And then, but there's a bunch of people somewhere in the business that go, why are we creating that? What are we doing that for? Why do we have to pay that person? Doesn't this all just happen without her?
yeah.
Pretty much.
So then I'm like, okay, now what? So NCR had been owned by AT&T at the time. And as you may recall, AT&T crashed and burned every tech company it bought. They had no business being in there. And so one of the companies that NCR had acquired prior to AT&T taking them over was the pioneer in in massive parallel processing, which is Teradata based in San Diego. And so AT&T spun off NCR and Teradata, and then Teradata and NCR split. And so right after that split happened, I worked with all those folks when I was a tax lawyer at NCR. So I called up who is the, she was the chief legal officer of NCR. And I said, hey, I'm going out on my own. Do you have anything you want to throw my way on a 1099 basis? And they're like, well, we're going to need somebody to do trade compliance. We know you've never done trade compliance, but we're pretty sure if you can understand transfer pricing rules, you can understand the trade rules. And that was 22 years ago. And loved it, still love it, miss it, being down in the trenches, but it's simply the most fascinating area of law I've ever encountered.
That was one of the things I wanted to focus on is how you developed your experience in kind of a new niche thing of trade compliance. It sounded like you used a lot of your experience as a tax attorney to roll over into a new position.
Yes, but not like directly. So I guess really I'm a regulatory attorney, and there's a real art to being a regulatory attorney. Regulations are so interwoven, and you can't just say, oh, section 482, which is the transfer pricing. That section only has 3 lines in it, but the regulations behind it are 150 pages. And so you have to learn when you get into the regs, it's going to take you're going to start here, and then it's going to refer you over here, and that's going to refer you over there. So there's a real art in understanding and how to work through all the layers of regulations. So to that extent, getting that foundation in tax regulations, which are beastly, really was the foundation for trade compliance, the trade compliance regulations, because there are a couple of sets of regulations under the trade, in the trade umbrella. Like four agencies really regulate international trade. So you have to work through all of the regulations. And they change constantly, which I like to tell clients, okay, what you were allowed to do 10 minutes ago, now you can't. They change that rapidly.
And not showing any signs of slowing down.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. Now I have to get, I don't have time, right? I don't have time to do that, that area of practice. I have to oversee. I have to oversee outside counsel who we have to engage to do that because we don't have anybody yet in-house to handle that.
So yeah, so you've got the federal acquisition regulations on their own. You could make a career out of.
People make a career just out of
Yeah.
government contracting.
And then you add on to that all of the ITAR and
Yes.
um,
Yep.
you could do the alphabet soup a lot better than I
And
can.
all the alphabet soup. And so, one of your questions is how did I land at Karman? And so I got recruited by the defense contractor based in Cincinnati that I was there for 8 years, and that's who I just left. They were one of my clients. And they had a small minority ownership interest that one of their shareholders exited and sold to a private equity firm, non-controlling interest. And, because I have practiced for a lot of years, and I've done a lot of things that are kind of not, again, typical. I've done tax, I've done trade, I've done, corporate, I've done contracts, I've done real estate. But what you typically don't get in one person is somebody that knows ITAR and government contracting. And so the operating partner for the private equity firm, I came to start working with him at Field. And he called me one day and he said, there's nobody out there like you. And I'm like, yeah, I know. And he wanted me to do the same thing I did for Field in Cincinnati, which is general counsel and chief compliance officer, for another one of their defense companies, and that was Karman. So I was with Karman doing that again on this fractional basis for like 3.5 years, and when they were getting ready to do the IPO at the beginning of the year, I was, talking to the executive leadership team. I'm like, okay, so has your outside counsel given you the playbook on what your world will look like as a public company? No, nobody had given them any insight into their compliance obligations. So I said, why don't I put together kind of a high level presentation for the board and senior management, and it was like a 35-page timeline of the entire compliance schedule for everything over 12 months. So 15 minutes after I gave that presentation, the CEO called me up and offered me the full-time in-house general counsel role.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let me back up to the fractional general counsel piece.
Yeah.
Um, th that's something that you hear about a lot now. You must have been one of the pioneers.
I
And
was. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yes. I really was. I've had many people over my career. I was featured in a law publication probably 6 years ago, and they were like, what is this? How have you done this? So it's fractional and a flat fee.
so for our students who don't know what we're talking about, what is a fractional general counsel?
So fractional general counsel is somebody who's not an employee of their client, and they provide a finite function for a finite period of time. So it's less than full time. And, I did different fractions for different, I hate that term, by the way, but everybody uses it.
Yeah.
Truly, I started at the very beginning of the gig economy.
Except
And
you weren't driving your car as a taxi. You were you were driving.
no, I was GCing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was GCing. So like for Field, I did 3 days a week. It was set Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Teradata, because I've never worked with anybody at Teradata in my time zone. Usually it's it's the Orient and Europe, so they're never on. I'm like always on the phone at 4:30 in the morning. So they just, that was an annual flat fee. Some clients it's a daily rate. Some clients it's a weekly rate. So, they're just a flat fee, and they don't care when I work, how much I work. In fact, they're like, well, it's to your benefit to be as efficient as possible because we're paying you this annual salary if you work 5 hours a week or you work 40 hours a week. And I was the only resource that did trade compliance. So, I had to develop a lot of processes and a lot of automation. So, yeah. So anyway, fractional, it's basically a part-time general counsel as a 1099 employee. If you know what that is, Christian. Do you know what a 1090? Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
You must be very organized. You'd have to be to keep. I mean, at the point that I was a GC, you kind of just go from meeting to meeting because your secretary told you that's where you were going next. As in your role, there's no way you could have pulled that off. You had to know exactly what was happening from moment to moment. And
And I don't have any admin. It truly is just me. And so, like, I would have 4 laptops up at the same time, and you can't, in the beginning, I would invite every calendar to every meeting. You can't do that because your calendar changes all the time. So one year, it was probably 4 years ago, I missed a call in December. And for Christmas, my husband got me one of those giant paper desk calendars, and I went to a paper calendar
yeah, I think I mean I
to
really
keep
miss paper.
everything organized.
Yeah, I mean maybe I should get it out again because I miss it. That's
Yeah, it's a big one. It's your desktop size.
yeah.
Yeah. Pencil and paper.
That will be the key. Yeah.
Because you got to have a good eraser.
So now that you're back in a big public company, I guess how big is Karman in terms of employees? It's
Around 1,500.
okay. So
And they have, oh my gosh, I bet they have 15 locations, 15 physical locations, 15 separate legal entities.
okay.
Oh, wow.
Well, that'll
Yeah.
keep you busy. So how has that been going from managing all of these different things to now having one client? And
Different.
huh?
It's different. It's different.
Yeah.
So I started full time July 1, and that first week, I was like, "Where's my calendar? Where's my calendar?" And in the meantime, I moved from Dayton, Ohio, to Chicago the month before. So we had all this upheaval, big change. It's been such a long time since I've worked for somebody. It's like I have to keep track of PTO. I feel like I only got certain number of days. How do I do that? I've never had to think about that. um, but so one of the things I really liked about how I practiced on my own, I always describe myself as inside outside counsel. So I was definitely outside counsel because I'm not an employee, but I became so embedded with the executive leadership team. I mean, I was on their executive leadership team, even though I'm not an employee. And, it's really important to me to have that relationship because it's through that relationship that you are able to provide the very best counsel and advice. When you know your client that well, which you don't get just as outside counsel because you're attending to a bunch of other people. But because I'm also like I function as in-house counsel, you get that deep knowledge of what's going on daily, operationally. What is the strategy? What are they trying to accomplish? You don't get that if you are at an outside law firm. You only get that in-house when you're part of that team. So that I love. It's even more than I hoped for, I should say, is and now being as the corporate secretary, my role with the board is it's great. I really like it.
Yeah, I'd love to get your insight on how you handle the balance between handling things with your own legal department and handling things with outside counsel.
So right now I am the legal department. I've always, all my clients where I'm their inside outside counsel, I didn't have any, there was no other attorney. So as I said, I really have relied on externs, and I've gotten really helpful work out of externs. This is different because it's public company, and you can't just say, go look up the FD regs and tell me about them. They're like, what's an FD reg? You have to have context about where that regulation fits in the overall SEC, 34 Act, 33 Act. So I'm not getting, yeah. So now I've just determined I have to, unfortunately, until we get through like our first proxy statement next year, and until I can build out my own department, we're going to continue to rely on outside counsel. It's just a fact of life. So, but to Neil's opening question about, or opening comment about this trend of pulling everything in house, I mean, that's just not practical. So we will always have outside corporate counsel that will always have the final review of any of our SEC filings. That's always the way it's going to be. We will always have outside labor and employment counsel, and yeah, so those two buckets for sure. I mean, we're using outside IP counsel right now. We'll have to see with the spate of acquisitions, our trajectory of acquisitions, who knows? We may need an IP counsel in-house to manage our data rights or our IP portfolio. So yeah, there's always a need for outside counsel. I just don't know of a board that would approve, um, you know, some massive law budget because they've brought everything in-house. So,
Yeah, and I think there's the issue of staffing for valleys and peaks. And, if you staff for the peaks, you end up
right,
having to lay people
exactly right.
in valleys. And I never wanted to do that. So
Yes.
I was always on to bring something fully in-house for me was something that I had to know that I was going to be able to sustainably employ
Right, exactly,
for years.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so true, so true. Yeah,
And, and sometimes oftentimes I would let the business be the one driving me expanding the department. If they said your outside counsel spend is too high, then I could
yeah,
say, well, I'm spending this much on IP, I'm spending that much on, there was nothing you could do about litigation.
yeah,
It ends up, you
right.
manage it, but you can't predict it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you can't reserve for it even, right? It's just too
Yeah.
hard. You can try to mitigate your risk by running your HR function, but yeah, that's just yeah, you could just never predict that.
Well, and
Yeah,
then when you try to reserve for it, you'll run into accounting rules that won't necessarily let you reserve for something unless you know that this amount is
right, right,
probable and
right.
estimable.
Yep.
So you get into that trap. I mean, I remember getting into an argument with the CFO one year who said, your litigation budget for next year is too high. And I said, fine, write down whatever you want. And he said, but
And we'll revisit.
yeah. And he said, wait, but I want you to put down I want an accurate number. And I was like, there is no accurate number. And we went round and round, and we were good friends, luckily, but we went round and round like this for half an hour, where every time he'd say, well, I don't like this number that you put down. I said, fine, change it.
Yeah, I
He's
don't
like,
like it
on what
either.
basis? I was like, I don't know. This is what we spent last year. And hopefully we'll spend less this year, but we could spend more. I don't have any
So,
idea.
you raised an interesting point about the role of business, and really it's the relationship between operations and legal, because truly, at the end of the day, it's business's call. It's not legal's call. I mean, legal can only point out the risk, and business can say, well, we're willing to take that risk. Now, the rubber meets the road where the risk they want to take is, fraudulent,
Right.
some sort of violation, and at which point they say we're doing it anyway. We're like, okay, we're parting ways. But and that's the other thing too. I have a mentor. She was the chief legal officer at Teradata while I was there, and she retired several years ago. And she's just phenomenal. She's a very unusual general counsel. So when I took this role, because I've never been the general counsel, number one, of a public company, and let alone a newly public company, and so we speak once a month, and we're talking about this exact thing. And she goes, you cannot be the best general counsel you can be unless you're willing to lose your job. And I was so struck by that. That is a really, I mean, that's what lawyering was about, right? It's always been about that dedication to integrity. And I don't know, we may not quite be in that boat anymore, but I love that sentiment and I've adopted it as my own. So can't be afraid to go confront go to toe with the CEO or with the board, because it's your job as the general counsel.
Right. You can't just be a spectator at the point that things are happening that you know are wrong, and that it's your career too. It's not just their business that they're going to mess up by saying, yeah, fraud sounds like a good way to go forward.
Yeah,
Nobody ever says it quite that way.
right.
Um, but when you and that's one reason to have people like us around, is because we can see through um, the the business strategy that isn't really a strategy other than
Yeah,
you can cheat out of what. That's where you have to stand up, because if you don't, you're not only going to have a problem in the business down the road, your career is going to be in
right.
ashes.
Jeopardy.
Okay, sermon over.
Sermon?
For
These are words young lawyers need to hear.
sure. For
Yeah.
sure. Well, speaking
Yeah.
of young lawyers, you've said you've worked so much with externs over the years, and we've really appreciated how much you have given to the externship program over the years. Um, has it changed over time? I hear some of my contemporaries and our contemporaries talk about these Gen Z kids and how they're different than we were. And I wonder your perspective on how much of that is just what every generation says about the generation one or two behind them, and how much do you think it's real that these kids, I'm pointing at Christian, are just different than the way we were?
That's a good question. You hear a lot of complaining about Gen Z. They can't write, they can't this, they can't that. I would say, other than maybe one or two, I have not experienced that with the UC externs. They
Okay.
are passionate, um, interested, they get the work done. Some of them have really been exceptional writers. They've all been very good researchers. And, typically, before Karman full time, it's hard to find research on ITAR. It really is. There aren't really, the Department of Defense doesn't publish advisory opinions. They don't publish interpretation guides. It's not like the SEC that's got a whole barrel full of ancillary materials that can help you. The Department of Defense doesn't have that. The Department of Commerce, which does the commercial side of the regulations, Department of Defense is the ITAR, the military. So they've had to really, and there is some stuff on the far, like when you're looking at appeals and things to the Board of uh, Appeals, but they've done really well finding what is available and synthesizing it. And I always make it a case because this is what I need. I don't just need you to regurgitate the law. Here are our facts, and I have them sit in on calls, client calls, emails. Here are our facts. I want you to take what you've learned and come up with a position based on our facts. And I don't care whether they're right or wrong. You have to go through the exercise. That is what law is all about, whether it's reading a regulation and applying it under your facts, or whether it's reading case law, or whether it's an administrative ruling, whatever. It's that. And we've had really lively conversations. So I'm pretty thumbs up on my experience with the Gen Z law students.
Well, we have the best ones.
Pardon me? You
Yeah,
have what?
we have all the best ones here.
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
they've been assigned to me for sure.
For sure. Go ahead.
Well, having so many different experiences and I'm sure a lot of positives and some negatives throughout your career, how do you maintain a passion for the law and keep that spark of why you went to law school in the first place?
There's personal responsibility here. People are in charge of keeping themselves interested in what they do. So I would say and this sounds, you know, remarkably hard to do, but it all starts with making good choices about how you want your career path to go. Now, I know that when you get out of law school, okay, fine, you got to get a job. I understand that. But I have never taken a job because of the money. I've always taken the job because it interests me. I can see where it might lead me. Like my first job out of law school, I made $27,000 working for the Court of Appeals, and I had turned down a $65,000 job at Deloitte, knowing that Deloitte, I wanted to go into tax law. That was my path into tax law. But everybody, everybody, my mentor, everybody said, no, do the Court of Appeals. And it was the absolute best decision because, one of your questions was, did that experience broaden your understanding of, practice areas? No, what it did was it taught me how to be a lawyer. It really taught me how to be a lawyer. And being at the Court of Appeals, you are talking about a pure legal review. I don't, not the facts. I'm not here to adjudicate the facts. It was the opportunity to really analyze and understand law, and then having to cohesively write an opinion because the judge I worked for, um, he would get out his red pen and he'd cross it out in front of me and he goes, no, but I like your style. So, nice try, but no, overwrought, you know? So I've always liked writing, and I really, really, really learned how to write, how to analyze, how to write analytically, how to write persuasively. And so, if I had made the decision based on money, I would not be where I am today, for sure. So that's number one. You have to really do something just, for some reason other than just the money. And then, I'm just naturally curious. And so I don't know how anybody stays interested in anything they do if they're not curious. So if you're a person who lets life happen to them instead of you happen to life, I don't know how to answer that question because, I'm a seize the light, seize the day kind of gal. And there, I understand you can't necessarily do that right out of law school, but you can make choices that can help you get where you think you want to go. And it's hard also is knowing, even in law school, even at your stage, Christian, where you only have one semester left, you may have already determined, oh yeah, I want to be corporate in-house, but I'm sure you have classmates that don't know what they want, and they're like, I just got to get a job. So, it's really a balance of trying to, that also takes thought, right? And reflection. What am I interested? What would allow me to be, carry on that interest. So one of my, I really like the three externs I have right now. They're so different. One was a philosophy major. One was I forget what she is, but she has a deep interest in the humanities. And here's how she's translating that. She's really interested in data privacy, and you're like, well, what does that have to do with her interest in the humanities? Well, it's because of how she approaches it about the biases that are in, well, I guess AI she's really interested into. It's about, the biases that are baked into AI. And so she's combining. That's brilliant. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. And when you say, how do you keep your passion? It's that kind of self-determination. It's like, I like these things. This is where the law is. How can I, marry them?
So speaking of AI, how much should Christian's generation be terrified that AI is going to take away their jobs?
Not at all. It's not AI, by the way. I mean, where we are right now is not really AI. It's just a Google search on steroids that reaches out more places and is faster and is more sophisticated, but it's not real AI yet. I have to say, I'm a recent convert to Chat GPT. I mean, like in the last month. And because we keep hearing this parade of horribles in the law setting about, somebody using Chat GPT to create a motion for summary judgment, and it's completely wrong. And, you hear that all the time. So I would never use it.
Yeah, if the only issue that we need to talk about ChatGPT is that people are citing cases that don't exist because they didn't realize that ChatGPT could hallucinate cases that don't exist. I'm
Right.
just like, oh, come on. There's a lot more that we need to
There's
talk
a lot more.
about.
So we had our CEO is like, listen, we need to get comfortable with evolving technology. And
Right.
so we had a high level executive presentation on Chat GPT, and one of our managers, one of our, on the senior leadership team was asking all these questions like, wow, he really clearly knows this. So I reached out to him afterwards and I said, well, you seem like you're quite the expert. And he goes, he does 50 chats per day. I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah, I want to know, I want to know a recipe. I want to know how to improve my manufacturing process. I want to know where to make a dinner reservation. I want to know how to optimize, so he's using it for all these things. And so I started using it. It's unbelievable. Like I have no internal support. I need to create a charter for the audit committee. Go to ChatGPT. And, so it's very good to rely. I mean, I have found a lot of value in it on that kind of thing. I would never ask it to, generate a legal argument for me, but I think it does have its place. And I don't think we are in danger of being replaced. I wouldn't even ask it to, like fill out a patent application, which I hear people are doing. I would not ask it. I would not ask it to do that. But I think it has its place in our arsenal. But
Yeah,
what'll be interesting
I,
is, well, go
I,
ahead.
sorry to jump in, but the things I've heard senior lawyers using ChatGPT for, and maybe other large language models, is stuff that I did as a junior litigation associate, but
Yeah,
not stuff that I learned anything from, right?
yeah,
Like, doing a deposition summary. Um, great. I'm happy that ChatGPT is doing that because, if I could read the deposition and not have to summarize it for someone else,
yeah.
there's just not a lot of learning in those things.
It's true. That's a really good point, and that was just brought to my attention recently to use it for that, kind of thing. Like, are we going to use it to summarize committee meetings? I don't know yet. We don't. Yeah, we're just finalizing our AI policy, so I'm not quite sure how broad that's going to be or not.
Well, I always find, I don't know if you've had this experience, but now that you're a new ChatGPT super user, you should try it out. I find that if I ask ChatGPT about something that I don't know very much about, I'm shocked and amazed and thrilled at what I get back. If I ask it about something that I am consider
Right.
myself an expert on, I look at the answer and go, close,
Ish.
but ish, but not really right.
Oh, does that now make you question this, what it returned for stuff you don't know?
Yeah. I mean, and that's why I would, but if I ask it something that's mission critical and decide to go with its answer instead of actually trying to learn the thing myself, then shame on me. I mean,
Yeah, that's true. That's
it
true.
might get to
It's,
that point,
yeah,
but it's not
trust
there
with
yet.
verification.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about your work with the Volunteer Lawyers Work Program.
Mm,
Uh, How much of that is, I know you've done quite a lot of that, including, I think you were president of VLP at one point in Dayton.
yes.
Um,
Yeah.
how much of that is giving back and how much of it is you getting back from doing that work?
Oh, what a question. I do not approach it as what I get back.
Yeah, but you do, don't you?
Wow, I've never thought about it like that. To me, um, service to others, we're somewhat privileged, right? We're able to go to law school, we're able to be lawyers, lawyers make good money. And, I feel like I should use use my talents, right, to help others who need that. Um, so yeah, I was raised Catholic, so we're always all about service to others in that profession. I mean, in that religion, and it's just always I've always done. We raised our kids, serving at the soup kitchen. I mean, it's just so ingrained in. Um, Lawyers are. I just feel like they've got a heightened responsibility because um, of their unique gifts. And, volunteer lawyers is all about civil representation. And other than criminal matters, some of these civil things touch on the most important parts of life, child custody, and they have nobody to help them, getting out of an abusive relationship, and they have nobody to help them. So it wasn't, I do get out of it. Yes, I'm sure on some level I do, because it's important to me to do that, to use my talents and my gifts that are unique to my profession to help others that just have no access to that. So I don't know if that really answers your question. I'm happy that I'm able to do that.
Yeah, I think the way I was thinking of it more is that whenever I do that kind of work, um, I think it matters more to those clients
It
than
does.
than it might to, my corporate clients that I've
Oh
worked.
my gosh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I think that kind of gets me back to, oh yeah, this is why I love this.
This is why. Yeah, this is why. I mean, really, why are we lawyers? What's the point? Is it just okay, make a lot of money and be important in my community? That's not why I did it. I'm sure there are people that is why they did it, but that's not why I did it.
That's a fantastic place to end unless you have something else you wanted to talk about.
No, I'm curious, Christian, how did you end up where you are in the corporate inside path?
Well, I started my first year and then going into my second year working at a mid-sized firm and was just looking at different options. I liked what I was doing, but wanted to always keep an eye on different things and just saw a MedPace opening on LinkedIn and just applied just because it was quick and easy. Didn't really think much about it. Um, Always thought I wanted to do litigation. I worked at the public defender's office in undergrad and just loved working
Ah,
directly with clients. I loved going to
mhm,
so I
mhm,
never thought about doing transactional work, even
mhm.
first year law school. I just thought that would be boring. I wanted to do litigation, do, competition, go to court, do all the fun things, and went through the MedPace interview. It sounded interesting, something I'd never done before. So I just decided to try do something new. I started obviously last May, worked all through the summer, worked all through the school year and plan to continue working, and I love it. It's something totally new. I'm learning something new every day. It is a publicly traded company, so there's a lot of different areas. It's a very growing company. The general counsel is he's a UC grad, so he's very open to having me do whatever we can do. So he's always giving me new projects, and there's always a ton of work to do. So I'm busy every day, and I love it. I think I want to keep working there.
That's
And,
fantastic. See, you thought you were going into litigation, you went a different path, and now look. And
and
it's and
how
it's very and it's interesting.
he
What's
ended
that?
up
Yep.
being part of the corporate law center is exactly something you were talking about earlier of he saw something that potentially interested him and approached me when he wasn't a corporate law fellow saying, "How can I be involved in this?" And so I don't just exclusively, keep the corporate law center as a little
Yeah,
tiny club that only the fellows are allowed in. And so he started participating in things that we were doing last year. And when I was able to open up an additional slot for a corporate law fellow, he was one of then I got two of them for the one, but he was one of the two people that then joined the center full time. Well,
that's
full.
great. I commend you for jumping
Yeah, it was really good.
jumping where your interest. Try something new and look at it. Yeah, I like that. And by the way, I cannot believe you actually got a job through LinkedIn.
It's the first one I've ever first one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that did just go in the black hole of whatever.
Yeah, right. I really have enjoyed LinkedIn. It seems like it's always ads and people just, saying how great
And
they
fake
are at certain
stuff.
things.
And
So
fake stuff.
yeah, exactly. So I rarely ever go on it. So it was just good timing, I guess. It worked out well though.
That's
Yeah.
great. Well, congratulations. Nice
Yep.
position to be in your the fall of your final year to have your job lined up.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a load off to not have to interview and you can just focus on school and getting done.
Okay, that's great.
Fantastic. Well, Susan, thank you again so much for your time and your continued support of the law school and our mission. And I'll just keep sending you those externs as many as you can take.
Sending me these externs. I appreciate it. Yeah, this was fun. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you.